Exactly.
It's never good when you realize you have to go potty right before the meeting. That was live. From 802 Scoop and Barry Beat. And good evening, everybody, and thank you for watching the Barry Beat podcast live from Main Street, Barre, Vermont. In studio with us today, we have wonderful and lovely Raylene, but we also have Miss Carol Dawes. How are you doing, Carol?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Anything
Good to have
exciting
you.
going on in your life these days?
I technically retired from 18 years, 18 years, 16 years as Barre City Clerk Treasurer back in May, and spent 6 weeks helping with the transition. So I've been officially retired since early July, and I've been busier, I think,
Now than ever.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, immediately after I officially retired, Barre City experienced the flooding again in early July, and I helped with flood recovery efforts, staffed on the library lawn for the next couple of weeks. I'm still under contract with the city to do some work associated with the tax increment finance district, and I understand we're going to talk a bit about that. I assisted out in the town of Orange because they found themselves without a clerk and heading into the August primary. And I helped their assistant clerk, who had never run an election before, to make it through the election. And I'm in the process of cleaning out my father's home. He passed away a year ago, and we're cleaning out his home to put it on the market and sell it. And so, yeah, just a few things.
Yeah.
Just a little busy. Just
Oh,
a
yeah,
little
and
busy.
I'm running for
Retired.
for the legislature. So, yeah.
Well, that is certainly the reason why we've got you here tonight. Not to mention, we always like to have you. We would love to have you around all the time.
Yes,
But we
yes.
certainly want to let folks know a little bit about yourself and what you're running for, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned it, the TIF. And for those that don't know, Carol is the TIF queen. She knows that program in and out and has been monitoring or managing it for the last, 10 years?
Yeah, about
10 years. So as a state rep, you're obviously going to take that information that you've learned working with it and bring it to the table in the State House, right?
Certainly hope to. Tax increment financing districts, how much time have we got?
Yeah.
Because it's not an easy concept to understand, but I think what really does sum it up is if you think of it as one of a number of economic development tools that can really help a community build. What it does is it provides a funding mechanism for a community to make infrastructure improvements, water, sewer, streets, parking, sidewalks, different things like that, that will support private development. And of course, the nice thing about private development is that it adds to your grand list.
Right.
It brings jobs to your downtown. It brings housing to your downtown. So they work hand in hand. It's a public-private partnership. Economic development tool. And the city of Barre, you have to go through an application and an approval process with the state. We did that back in 2012 and 2013. We ended up doing a number of parking projects that led to the building of City Place, led to the rehabilitation of the Blanchard Block, led to the building of the Summer Street Housing Project, and supported all the other development that has happened since then. Back then, the focus was on parking, and it's in the last 10 years, things have really changed. So now we're looking more at focusing on housing needs and how to partner with developers on growing housing. There's a project that's in the works right now for Seminary Street that would build, I think the current model is somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 housing units there. And the TIF program would help through infrastructure improvements, water, sewer, stormwater, parking, stuff like that. So it's a very sophisticated, very intricate program that requires a lot of special oversight and reporting and all that kind of stuff. And I actually have testified numerous times at the legislature about ways to enhance the program, how to support the program, how to create various other iterations of the program that would benefit not only communities like Barre, but perhaps a lot of smaller communities that don't have the staff capacity to deal with a big program like this. So we're hoping that we can talk to the legislature about growing this opportunity, because we really do need it statewide.
Yes. Sounds very beneficial all the way around, a win-win.
Yeah,
really.
yeah, it definitely is. There are people who think that they're concerned because they think that it is taking money out of the education fund, but it isn't. What it's doing is it's deferring money into the education fund, but it doesn't take money out. Essentially what happens is that when new development is built and those projects have to pay property taxes, and part of our taxes are municipal and part of them are education. What happens is that a portion of that new money, that new tax money, is set aside to help pay for the debt associated with the infrastructure improvements. And a portion of the new tax money does actually go to the municipality and to the education fund. So there is a small amount of growth in those funds right away. And then through the course of the 20-year life of the TIF district, the rest of that money is deferred for the debt payment. And then after the life of the TIF district is over, then it all rolls into the municipal coffers and the ed fund. So it's not taking money away from anything. And that's one of the arguments that some people have made, and we spend a lot of time trying to educate people on why
it's a future investment.
Exactly, exactly, definitely.
Let's give it a real life example, right? Like think of City Place. We do you know how much money we get in taxes on City Place? It's like 300, isn't it? Or is it 150?
Well, they're on the books. Their assessment is $8 million, and the tax rate is say $3 per 100 for calculation purposes. So that's 240,000 in taxes in an annual basis.
So we'll just say 240,000, and about 50% of that is the education fund, and
currently at 25% is going to the ed fund. 25% of the education portion is going to the ed fund right now, and that's all new money for the ed fund. 25% of the municipal portion comes to us, and then the balance is helping with the debt service on the TIF projects that the city has done to date.
right.
So.
What I was saying though is that if you look at what it was before, which was a vacant lot,
Right.
it's definitely making way more money. Even with the TIF setup, it's making more money than what it was bringing in before.
Yep.
And that's what I was getting to for folks to understand that this economic program that you have been like single-handedly working on for the last 10 years has significant benefits to our community and to our education and state funds, right?
Well, I do want to just say it ain't only me.
Well, true.
The city manager plays a big role. Obviously, the public works department and the engineer, because they're the ones who plan and execute all the infrastructure projects. And the planning department plays a big role too in coordinating. And, we all work really closely together on the annual reporting. We actually are getting ready the latter part of this month they do a spring and fall monitoring visit where the state comes and they tour the downtown and they look through all our books. And, there's a lot of continuing oversight through the life of the district. So.
Right. And one of the things that you mentioned was testifying,
Yep.
right? And so you're really familiar with the halls of
The process.
the halls of what I like to call as the Moist Isleys of which for folks that don't know, that's a Star Wars reference to Den of Thievery but you're very familiar and comfortable in those halls.
Yeah,
right?
the two committees that have been most involved with TIF-related stuff has been House Ways and Means, which of course is a money committee, and Senate Finance, which is also a money committee. And I've spent time in both of them offering testimony on why the TIF program is not only valuable in its current form, but why it should be expanded. So.
Yeah. You think maybe the TIF program would be helpful if we expanded it down into the north end?
It would be incredibly helpful if we expanded into the north end. It would be helpful if we could, one of the things that has been considered is the idea of project-based TIF. Right now, a TIF is essentially a geographic based. It's a plot of land. In Barre City, it runs from the river to Summer Street. It runs from, City Hall Park to Denty Park. That's essentially the area. And so any projects within that district qualify. But what has been proposed is the idea of moving to project-based, where you could identify, like, we want to rebuild housing on 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Streets, in the North End, or in Granite Street, River Street, that area, those areas that have been heavily impacted by the floods. Or the Prospect Heights housing project that's been proposed for up Prospect Street. If you could identify a project and get a TIF district for that, Prospect Heights is a perfect example. They're going to need a ton of infrastructure, city investment for streets, stormwater, water, sewer, all that kind of stuff to build out that area that's being proposed for housing. And if we were able to identify it as a TIF district, as a project-based TIF district, we could, the city could enter into a public-private partnership with the developers to help assist with that. I mean, they have been fortunate. They got the Northern Borders Grant, which will make a huge difference, but it certainly won't pay for everything. So that's a perfect example of the kinds of projects that a project-based TIF format would benefit. The other thing is that, as I mentioned earlier, much smaller communities that don't have a lot of capacity, they don't have a lot of staffing, the amount of work necessary to, first of all, apply for a TIF district and then manage it through the bookkeeping and et cetera, they don't have that kind of capacity. And if there was a way to do smaller TIF districts that had less, that weren't as onerous from a bureaucratic standpoint, it would be great would be able to benefit them. Yeah. There's also limits in the number of communities that can have TIF districts, and that just seems silly to me. I mean, they're an economic development tool. They should be available to anybody because they are so beneficial.
So I assume that's a pretty solid Carol Dawes in support of TIF districts going into the State House.
Yes, definitely. And everybody who's listened to me talk about it at the State House knows already that I'm a big proponent.
And you have a report tomorrow night, correct?
Yes, at the City Council meeting, we are we're cleaning up some bookkeeping, a bookkeeping error that was from 2013, before I was the TIF queen, where the city purchased a couple properties that was part of the parking program that we were implementing through TIF. And before we even started the TIF district, we put down deposits on 2 pieces of property. And we never recaptured that money. We paid it out of the capital fund, but didn't recapture it out of the TIF fund. And so we have to have a public hearing saying, this is why we're doing this, this is what we're doing, and then we have to take that information and we have to submit it to the Vermont Economic Progress Council, VEPC, which is the body that oversees TIF districts. And we have to ask for their permission to be able to make this transfer.
do it.
So this is like step 4 in an 8-step process to be able to make this reimbursement. So, yeah.
So one of the things that I want folks to realize is that you can ask questions. Carol certainly will field questions from the chat. So if folks want to ask Carol a question, just drop it in the chat. I also encourage folks to click like, little smiles, everything else.
And
it's
share,
all really good.
share
and
the podcast so that
the
other people get to
podcast.
see that may not have
Absolutely.
seen.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we talked about with the TIF is housing. And North Seminary Street, that project that, I'm going to give Tom a lot of credit for that because I feel like his single-handedly, obviously it's not single-handedly, but
Right, there's
I think
always a team.
There's always a team, but I think Tom did a major work on that to get it through. And the question for you about is how do you see your role as a state representative in the housing crisis that we have currently?
Well, I think housing actually is one of there are a number of, I'm sure we'll get to talking about affordability, which is a key component of what I'm sure the legislature will be taking up this coming session, and housing certainly plays into that. We're in desperate need of housing. And we need to find ways to invest in housing with the understanding that there's similar to what we were talking about with the TIF district about how it's making an investment for payoff in the long run. It's the same thing with housing. If we invest in housing, we will grow the number of people who work here. We will fill vacant jobs at hospitals and schools. We will have people bring their families with them, which will put more kids in the schools, which will make the schools more efficient and effective as far as cost per student. There are so many different ways that filling housing needs will solve other problems down the road. So certainly I would advocate for strong investment in housing. That doesn't necessarily mean writing a check because we don't have a lot of money.
Right, there's not a lot of checks out there.
Nobody has a lot of money. And it's not government's job to be a developer. It's not our job to go out and build houses. But I think it is government's job to review what there is in place for incentives, for programs that foster economic development, for reviewing various permitting and other things that might be creating roadblocks to development. And finding ways to ultimately incentivize private development through what public input we can do through government. So I think that that's important. And it's important for us. One of my one of the things that I think about all the time is you hear people talk about affordable housing. And I think it's important that we understand that affordable housing means across the spectrum.
Right, because it could mean all kinds of different things depending on who you are.
Exactly. That affordable is housing for people coming out of homelessness. It can mean the young family just looking for their starter home. It can mean the empty nesters. It can mean seniors. It can mean it's everything across the board. And we need to be able to find housing and provide housing for all those needs. So,
Yeah.
So we do get a couple questions.
Yep.
The first one is from Linda Kuchar, and she
hey, Linda.
she would like to know, since you were the TIF queen, the money for the Pearl Street walkway, the pedway.
Yep.
Where did the money come from? Do you know where it came from? Did it come from our TIF?
For the pedway itself, there were a couple of different funding sources. There was some grant money through the state, some Transportation Association grant money, and also some TIF money. It was one of the things that was included in the TIF plan was creating connectivity between North Main Street and the North Main Street shopping districts and the public parking that was behind the buildings on the east side of North Main Street. And that's where the Pearl Street pedway came in. It created that connectivity by putting in a pedestrian-friendly, lit, lighted space that was more welcoming and people felt comfortable walking between those areas. So certainly some of it did come from TIF. Other TIF projects that we did, there was work over on the Enterprise Alley, behind the Kitty
Corner.
Corner Cafe.
Yeah.
Over in that neck of the woods, there was parking work done behind Northfield Savings Bank in that neck of the woods. And one of the things that I like to call attention to is all those projects together cost us about $2.2 million in TIF money. But we leveraged double that in grant money to create those projects. So we were able to use that money essentially 3 times over to get the work done.
Yeah, you created a pathway, basically.
Yeah.
Great. So the other question that we have is from Wendy Ducey, and she wants to know, what is your number one priority? So the get her done.
Well, my number one priority is to do whatever I can to get everybody talking to each other and listening to each other and being civil to each other. It's the reason I'm running as an independent. I feel really strongly that there needs to be more respect, there needs to be more open minds, there needs to be more of a sense of common ground, and that we're all in this together. I have said, and I think, Michael, I may have said this to you, everybody who is serving in the State House was elected to represent their people. So they represent Vermont. And to me, that I need to remember that when I'm talking to people. I need to remember that everybody I'm talking to is representing their people. And that we need to be able to have conversations. And that we need to start from a place of that sort of commonality and respect. I've been advocating and lobbying in the State House for the last 10 years, mostly on behalf of the Vermont Municipal Clerk and Treasurers Association. I was their legislative chair. And I flatter myself, I've got a reputation in the State House as being thoughtful, respectful, willing to work with people. And so I hope that not only do I continue to bring that to the State House, but that I can foster that
In
as
other people.
Yeah, yeah. That, I mean, so that's kind of an umbrella. It's obviously not a specific topic.
But it
but
is.
it's,
It will
you know,
bring. It'll bring more specific topics, hopefully, because people will be more open-minded and willing to
Yeah.
speak with each other. Hopefully.
If I wanted to narrow it down a little more, drill down a little more, I would say that my number one focus is that whatever we're talking about in the State House, we're looking at it through a lens of living within our means. You know, that I think is vitally important. That we need to. We're a small state. We have limited resources, and we need to live within those limitations. And that means having hard discussions, making hard decisions, but doing them together.
Yep.
So.
Nice. And Wendy says that, thank you. I appreciate that, Carol. We need more communication and not talking over each other. And that covers all topics. That's needed in all areas.
Yeah.
So just a reminder, folks, if you want to ask a question, Carol's willing to answer, although I didn't really tell her that we would be posing questions from the field. You're okay with that, though?
Surprise!
That's all right. You've
I
got
know.
me trapped in a
Right.
corner
I know,
here.
we got you trapped.
That's why you wonder on the inside.
That's right. The one thing about Carol is she has no problem answering questions. She's very good at what she does, and she knows her stuff. She knew the TIF question about the pedway, whereas when Linda asked me, I had to like search through Times Argus articles, and I still didn't give the right answer. So sorry, Linda.
I
That's the
can
reason-
provide all the documentation to back it up.
I've been, you can.
That's right.
I've been shut off from my email, so. So anyway, yeah, I mean, we could get into one of the topics that Raylene definitely has a heart for. You know, we have an epidemic in our community. You know, it's happening every single day, and I'll let Raylene take it from here. I'm sure.
I mean, just addiction, how we're going to move forward with addiction, and a lot of people, there's a huge misunderstanding that there's all kinds of help out there, and there really isn't. We don't have nearly enough here, and what we have for sober living and rehabilitation is extremely limited, and rehabilitation is 14 to 21 days maximum, which really isn't rehabilitation.
It's
more
a
like
start, but
yeah.
it's
more like a detox, especially if there's nothing to come to.
yeah.
And so, is there anything that you believe that you might be able to do to help facilitate maybe a path forward for that as well?
Well, I would certainly hope that we can continue to, again, to me, the cold hard fact is that everything is tied to the economic development. If we can help people through recovery, then they become solid citizens again, and they
Right.
get jobs, and they live in housing, and they have their families with them, and they, and that creates a holistic community and moves us forward. So it's to our benefit not only to be saving people's lives, but to help them so that they become participating members of the community again, so they're able to. We've been incredibly fortunate. Fortunate may not be the right word, but there are a number of opioid settlements that have come down the pike. And during my last year or so as clerk treasurer, I signed the city of Barre up to receive our portion of those settlements, because there's settlement money coming to every state that participated in the lawsuits. And we were able to sign up for our portion. And to date, the city of Barre has received over $100,000. We have invested it into the Turning Point. Yep. We put money towards their purchase and rehabilitation of the property on South Main Street, which is going to be a wonderful resource for city residents and for people around the area. We've used some of the money to help equip the fire department and emergency medical services staff with, unfortunately, the materials that they need, because they deal with it every day. And we have more money not only in the bank right now, but more money coming in for the next 18 years. I mean, these settlements are huge and pay off for a number of time. And the state has money too. Because not everything trickled down to the local level. So I think what's important is that we identify what money is available, and we use it to combat the negative impacts that were being imposed on the communities by the pharmaceutical companies that were creating the drugs, and ultimately ended up with these settlements. I think that, on the state level, we should certainly be looking at what we have, what are we receiving, what are we doing with that money,
what are we spending it on?
Exactly, and how can we invest it in the recovery efforts? So that would be my hope.
Nice. Let's talk about the one thing that's always on Barre mind in the last 2 years is flood mitigation and flood issues. Where do you stand on that, and are you going to support legislation to give us a nice big thing that does river sedimentation maintenance?
You're quoting the city manager now.
I am.
Yes. But hey.
Yeah. There are a number of different things that we can do, and that both the federal and the state government can help us with. What we need to do is, yes, we need to look at the river systems. We need to look at them as a system, not just within Barre City's borders. We need to go upstream. We need to go downstream. We need to look at it system-wide, and we need to we look for ways to mitigate the impacts. We need to look for ways to allow the rivers to do what rivers want to do. In many ways, I've said this to numerous people, it's our own darn fault. If you go back 150 years almost, and this isn't unique to Barre, but as people built communities in the valleys, by the rivers.
Move things around.
We moved things around. We channelized the rivers. They actually moved the Stevens Branch, which runs behind City Hall. They rerouted it so that it's on the other side of the train tracks, so that the train tracks could be on the same side as most of downtown Barre. And when they moved it, they channelized it. They built these big granite block channels so that it was constricted. It doesn't have anywhere to go. And so when it fills up, it just comes out the tops.
Right, pours over the side.
Right.
Yeah.
The same thing is true with the brooks that come into town, the Potash Brook and Gunner Brook. They not only were channelized, but they were culverted and run underground. And so what happens is those culverts get inundated during a flood, and then the water backs up to where they daylight, just up the hills a little ways, and again, they overrun their banks. And so what we need to do is we need to look at, how does that whole system work? How do we resize things so that they have enough capacity? How do we allow space for the rivers and waterways to ebb and flow as they need to. I know one of the things that's being looked at here in Barre City is some of the FEMA buyouts, some of the properties that were heavily impacted by the flooding would be bought out, and then those areas would be reshaped
Like
in such a
ponds.
way to allow the water to slow down, fill out as it's coming into the city, so that it would not impact the areas further downstream. So, and that's been successful elsewhere. Northfield, after Irene, back in 2011, they had a whole neighborhood that essentially was taken down, created a space for floodwaters to ebb and flow into, and it's been incredibly successful. We've had, here in Barre, we've had success with the area on Brook Street, where we put in flood mitigation
the racks.
right,
Yep.
to help keep the, logs and branches and trees and stuff from coming down and clogging the bridges and the culverts and stuff like that. It was a start. There's more to do, and it needs to be done, statewide. Those kinds of explorations and studies, it's all science. It has to be done statewide to figure out what's the right way to mitigate and hopefully, prevent this kind of unfortunate event in the future.
And again,
so-
something that you'll need to facilitate the conversations that you were talking about earlier, because it's a really tough subject for a lot of people. And so if you can be the olive branch for everybody, maybe that might be helpful, because it's a really touchy subject with a lot of people for a lot of reasons.
And it's, it's incredibly difficult because these are people's homes. You look at the buildings that were damaged down in the north end, those are people's homes. And to talk about just tearing them down, there are places where that might be the best,
Right.
The best outcome. But there's also, I know the city has received money from the state to help with elevating some of the buildings, and they're in the process. One of the things the council's going to talk about tomorrow night is building criteria for which properties might qualify for that. So it's not one size fits all for a solution, but it is, we have to put all those cards on the table, figure out which ones are the best, and we need to be respectful and responsive to the fact that these are people's homes. Some of them generational homes.
Right, I was
So,
going to say, some of them are family homes, literally. They're they've been around for a long time. Well, the Candy's family's place on the corner of, is it 4th?
A second in Maine. Yep, they've had that. I mean, I remember going to the Creamy Stand as a kid.
Me too.
They had the little spider monkey.
Yeah, it's been there for a very
was a
long
spider
time,
monkey.
and I know several people down there that's the case. As they got older and their parents retired, they bought their parents' home, and that's the way it is now.
And then there's also people, I can remember talking to a woman last year who, this was her first home, and she had only bought it a few months before the flooding.
Yes, she's on
And-
First Street, I believe.
And
yes.
and so of course it has incredibly special meaning for her. This was a huge investment. I mean, it's, in many cases, it's the biggest investment any of us will make
ever.
is to buy our homes. So there's a lot of we have to be really respectful and sensitive to those needs. So.
Clayton says hello, Carol, and Johnny says, well, he says, hey, ladies, but it was when just the two of you.
He's not talking to you.
Not talking to me.
Not talking to you today.
Just want to remind folks, if you want to ask a question of Carol, just pop it in the chat and make sure you click like and you share, drop some little face, emojis and stuff, because it makes the Facebook gods happy.
Yeah.
So you got one?
Well, I just wonder if, like, well, we can switch gears a little bit from this kind of stuff and go into some of the things that we've discussed with others as well, because it is also a hot topic right now, and that is crime and repeat offenders and the whole mantra of catch and release, in which we know that our police force works super, super hard. They do all they can for an investigation and get people into court, but that seems to be where it stops. And so what are your feelings about that? One, that the catch and release, and two, what are your thoughts about bail reform and reforming all the way around what we do while we're prosecuting?
I mean, one of the things that I do support is I support alternative ways of holding people accountable. I support restorative justice programs. I think that they definitely have a place, particularly because they help put a face and a community impact on some of the crimes that are committed. I think sometimes people don't understand the impact of what they've done, and by having to face their victims, face their communities, make reparations, I think it helps from an educational standpoint as far as, I talked earlier about creating a holistic community and welcoming people into the community. And so I think that those kinds of steps are important. There certainly is a place for the people who need stronger enforcement, and certainly the courts should be holding people accountable for the crimes that they're committed based on what is on the books for, what is a crime, what are the penalties, what are the, I do think that there are inequities in bail systems, in people who get caught in those cycles of being found. As an example, if your vehicle isn't registered and you get, you end up getting caught for that, and now you've got to pay bail, but you can't afford the bail because then you can't afford to register the car, and there've got to be ways to work around those, to fix those inequities, to try to create some more level playing field across the board. I do think Barre is actually in many ways kind of a poster child for what works well. I think that going back several years, Barre really invested in community policing, the concept of community policing, by putting essentially a social worker embedded in the police department, who works with people who have, for whatever reason, fallen through the cracks, have come to the attention of the police department for numerous reasons, and need some help. They don't need to be incarcerated; they need help. And this staff person has been incredibly helpful with that kind of thing. We also, relatively recently, we now share a mental health clinician with Montpelier. Yep. That's another service we offer. Our officers have been through intensive domestic violence training through a number of grant programs that we have. They work very closely with Circle. Yeah. And so I think that we really are an example of what community policing can look like. And I know that recently they have increased foot patrols in the downtown. And that's a perfect example of the way to hopefully combat crime by nipping it in the bud through other ways to address, the potentials for crime, is to find other ways to engage with the community. So, but I think that there definitely are ways that the judicial system and the court system can continue to find ways where they have to, they have to uphold what's on the books for the laws and for the penalties, but they also need to be aware of where are the opportunities to do restorative justice.
Nice. And, well, you were also, weren't you on a COSA? No, you weren't.
No, I wasn't on the COSA team, but I was on the
reentry.
Reentry with through the Barre Justice Center for a number of years. Yeah.
So one of the exciting topics within the state of Vermont is education.
Near and dear to your heart, Michael.
Oh, yes, it is. It's very.
Yeah. There's
I think,
another formula that's way confusing, right?
Yeah, that formula is insanely confusing.
Just the acronym for, that showed up on the ballot.
LTWDAMFFFZZT.
Yeah, that, whatever it is.
So, Carol, you have just been given a magic wand that fixes the education issues within the state of Vermont. I ask you to wave it and tell us what happens.
I think that there is no easy solution. And I had mentioned before that, one of my main focuses is going to be on living within our means, and the fact that Vermont has limited resources and we have to live within those limitations. And I think education is a perfect example. We can't afford to continue to maintain the 8 million individual small schools, small school buildings, small school districts. We need to look for ways to build economies of scale, whether that means merging school districts, whether it means, and I know that this is not a popular thing, and I'm not saying that it is the solution, but it needs to be on the table for the discussion, closing smaller schools. Because, every school that's open, whether it's got 40 kids or 400 kids, has custodial staff and has an electric bill and has a roof that needs to be maintained or fixed and has a heating plant that needs to be maintained or fixed. And we just, all of those things are adding to the cost. And when we look at the number of students that we have in our schools and we divide those costs by the number of students, it just keeps going up. And I think the voters very clearly this year said we can't afford it. And so what that means is that we need to have the hard discussions and say, well, then we need to look at how do we get to a number that we can afford. And I don't think that we want to do anything that's going to negatively impact the quality of education. As a matter of fact, we want to continue to enhance that. I think education is the silver bullet. I think it needs to be as good as it possibly can be, because it makes all the difference in the world. It breaks generational poverty, and there's all kinds of things that education does for us. But we need to say, this is what we can afford, and how do we get there? It's not going to happen overnight, and it's going to take very difficult discussions. So it's been. I've been watching what's happening with Washington Central School District, where they've been talking about the possibility of closing a couple of their smaller elementary schools.
I saw that the other. I was just talking to a parent about that actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's I understand. I grew up in Northfield, and I'm a marauder from way back. I mean, and how important school identities are to a community. But I also know that we need to be able to live within our means, and it's going to be really difficult discussions. And I've never had children in the school district, but as I said, I think education is a silver bullet. So it is worth it to me, and should be to everybody, that we maintain the level of education to the best that we can. And that may mean that we need to find ways to economize on facilities, on administration, through merger. So it's going to be a tough discussion.
Yes.
Yeah.
No magic wand answer then.
Sorry.
It's just not there.
Darn it.
Understandable. It is. It's definitely a tough, it's going to be difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
But I will say that if anybody has the capability of dealing with it, it is Miss Carol Dawes. So did you receive an email today from, I think you were on an email list.
I don't know.
Are
I got
you-
notification.
Question.
Oh, I got a notification about the Times Argus is. Have you seen that? The Times Argus is hosting a candidate forum.
The Labor
Not
Hall, right?
next Wednesday. It's two weeks away, or I think it's 2 weeks. I
Yes,
can't
the
remember. It's the
16th.
16th, which is next
16th.
week.
Yep.
Where they're going to be doing the Barre City candidates at 6 o'clock, and then the Barre Town candidates, I think, at 8 o'clock. And yes, it's up at the Labor Hall, open to the public. It'll also be streamed and recorded and stuff like that. So that'll be a great opportunity for people to see all of the candidates together in one place.
So I was referring
Sorry,
to...
I'm plugging another show on
that's fine.
yours.
That's
No,
fine.
no,
we're
absolutely
big
not. Yeah, that's
Barry
that's great.
Beat, 802 Scoop, we're all very big supporters of the Times Argus,
Yes,
the,
we
the
are.
paper
Absolutely.
of record in the city of Barry.
Yeah, well, I've been checking in with Papa's, like, constant. Let us know, because it's something that we'll definitely promote for sure.
Yep. There was actually, it looks like the governor is putting you on some sort of informational list as well, and obviously this is like brand new information I'm dumping on you. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. I haven't checked my email since early afternoon, so if it came through, I will get it when I get home or tomorrow. So next time I look.
My guess is that the Governor Scott is probably asking people to consider voting for you. That would be my guess, just based on the list. And
Smart man.
he is a smart man, and I know that Barry loves him. And even though it sounds like you didn't ask for it, that's definitely that's something for folks to understand, is that, even though you didn't ask for it, it sounds like the governor is going to be endorsing you on not endorsing you, because I think you have to accept the endorsement.
Right.
But
He's giving his kudos to
he's
you.
giving the kudos to you, yes, which something that is pretty awesome, and I'm sorry I just sprung that upon you.
That's okay.
But
You didn't even bring her flowers, Michael.
I know, right? Now I feel terrible. But it's and this will be the last question that I have, because we are pushing that 1 hour, and I want to make sure that we don't keep you too long. The governor experienced some significant pushback from the legislature this year, and I think that, one, the relationships are certainly tattered, and I think that you've already stated that you want to make relationships there. And I think that certainly is something that you're going to be able to do. What is your thoughts about the mass amount of vetoes that came to the governor or from the governor that was overridden by the legislature?
First of all, I support Phil. I support the governor. I do. We don't agree on everything. I don't agree with anybody on everything.
Right, exactly. You can't, yeah.
So we don't agree on everything, but I do believe, first of all, he was elected by an overwhelming number of Vermonters. So as far as I'm concerned, he does have a mandate from the voters. And as I mentioned before, everybody who's either representing through the legislature or through the administration, they're representing the people who have elected them, and that deserves a certain level of respect. I think that one of the challenges with the supermajority in the legislature right now is that it creates an imbalance just by its definition, and because of that, it disincentivizes negotiation and collaboration. And so I think that when the governor feels forced to veto things, and then when they're overridden, instead of creating that sense of collaboration, it just creates more divisiveness. And I'm hoping that that I can at least bring to the table the willingness to listen, the willingness to engage. I think some of the vetoes, I supported what the legislature did as opposed to what the governor did, and vice versa. But I think that there needs to be more of a sense of engagement than a sense of just. I can't think of what the right word might be, but it feels like there wasn't a willingness to listen to each other. So I'm hoping that will change over time. I saw the governor last week, and we were talking, and he said to me, anything I need, and he was willing to help out with anything that I need, and I hearken back to oh gosh, it's got to be 18 years ago or so, when a local person was running for the state house, and the then governor, who was Governor Douglas, endorsed the local candidate, and there was local pushback, people going, oh, why is the governor weighing in on a local election, and that has really resonated with me, and so I am reticent to seek any kind of endorsement from anyone on a higher scale. So, but
Which is
but
definitely
I
some-
support the governor.
She has
so
all
he
of
can,
us.
Right. So,
Well, that was
And she has the endorsement of all of us.
yeah. So we are at 1 hour, and I do want to give you, just an opportunity to tell the voters of Barre City why they should reach out to you, not reach out to you, vote for you. Well, I'll also reach out to you,
Right.
which they can do by going to, what's your email address?
carolforbarry@gmail.com. So. That's an easy one. I sent out an initial postcard back the end of August. I've got another postcard going out the end of this week. It has my email address on there, Facebook, website, phone number. Give me a call. I'm happy to talk with anybody. I certainly will be at the candidate forum next week that the Times Argus is putting on. I have nearly 20 years of service to the citizens of Barre City. I was a counselor for about 3.5 years, and then I was clerk treasurer for 16 years. And both of those positions are independent positions. I strongly believe that local politics is nonpartisan and needs to be maintained that way, and that's certainly the way I've always considered myself, to be open to anybody, open to talking to anybody, and I hope to continue to serve the people of Barre City by moving into the State House. So I look forward to that.
All right. Great. Well, Carol, we want to say thank you for joining us on the Barre Beat podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely.
much.
Anytime you want to come down, you are more than welcome to come to
100%.
Barre Beat podcast. Absolutely. Just let me know, and you could just randomly show up in the window and just be like,
Right.
Not
Here I am.
No.
we would gladly take you in.
No, Carol has to save us all and do a podcast every once in a while so we can have them at reasonable hour, because Michael likes to have podcasts at 8 o'clock at night on a Monday.
I know. I was like, no, 6.
Yeah.
6.
It's not as
And the
easy
majority
for
of us
me.
loved that idea, Carol.
Well, thank you very much. And Glenn Brummert says thank you very much as well.
Yes.
Great.
And once again, thank you for coming on, and good luck. Make sure folks...
And good luck to you, Mr. Booten, who is also running for the same position. So
Yes. You guys would make one hell of a team. That's all I got to say. Yeah.
Well, I can tell you that, I'll just
She
say
could
it.
teach you
I've
a
been,
lot.
I've
have
been
you
saying,
had him over in the hot seat here?
No, he's
Raylene?
going to, though.
Okay, good.
Very
Yes.
soon
Do you
he's
want-
going to be.
Do you want to be the one that's asking me questions?
Yeah, because we can arrange that.
We can arrange
Quid
it.
pro quo.
We could arrange that. Absolutely. No, I really appreciate you coming in,
Yes.
and anybody that's talked to me, they know how much I love you, and yeah, so it was really great to see you and have you come in. And with that, I do want to say thank you to you guys, and thank you everyone for watching the Barre Beat podcast live, Main Street, Barre, Vermont. We hope you have a wonderful evening.
Yes.